I am the biggest asset in the portfolio of the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Quiet, please.
The biggest asset in the portfolio of Philip Morris Tobacco Westinghouse.
Roll sound.
Let's do our show.
I get paid a fortune to do exactly what I love doing.
They got their money's worth.
Pictures up.
I work side by side with my husband, who is genuinely impressed by me. And all I have to do to keep it is kill for 36 weeks in a row.
Okay, let's go.
And then do it again the next year. You know, I did this show so Desi and I could be together.
Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to Mix Presents Sound for Film and Television. I'm Tom Kenny, I'm the editor of Mix Magazine, and we're here today to talk about Being the Ricardos from Amazon Studios, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin. And we're joined today by two of the key members of the sound team, with Renee Tondelli, who's speaking to us from New York, supervising sound editor, worked with this crew 10 years, I understand, Renee. And Daniel Pemberton out of London. Daniel, hot composer right now, and I understand just won World Soundtrack Composer of the Year. Congratulations, Daniel. Very well. And we should mention a couple of members of the sound team. We have production sound mixer Steve Amaro, who is working and could not be with us, and the re-recording mixers Julian Slater and Michael Babcock, certainly essential to the film. Everybody's out working, which is a good thing. Love the movie. Renee and Daniel, let's start with the fact that it's a period piece in the 1950s. We opened and we sort of established that very early. Renee, what are the sort of challenges? What do you start thinking about? You say, okay, I'm going back to Hollywood in the 50s.
Well, the first thing we thought about is the set, the studio, because a lot of this film is shot on the TV set. So I started to do research from the old TV engineers that were still around. It's like they always talked about bells, like what were the bells? The bells were actually this klaxon alarm bell that only is made in London, in England. So we ordered one of those. We brought it to, because that announced when it was going to be recorded, when they were going into record, and when they were coming out of record on a set. And just as an example, we took that and wired it up and went to Warner Brothers at night down in the back lot and found an old warehouse and
I love it.
ran it out and did a bunch of bell sounds in there. We found there was equipment that was used that was very unique at the time in the Ricardos, because Desi wanted to shoot it in film, with film, and at the time he wanted to use these film cameras, and they didn't have dollies, they didn't have pulley systems, he basically created a lot of this equipment. So we did a lot of research finding out which equipment to use and all that sort of things, and recreated that. A lot of the there were many different sets in this, and we would go between flashbacks and many different periods and times, and most importantly, really, we reflected what Lucy was going through with our backgrounds and our ambiances. And we really keyed more into her. So when she was feeling great, there was a lot of levity and excitement and, wonderful things going on in the background that we liked. And when her mood started to change and things started to go bad, then we reflected accordingly with that same sentiment. So there was a lot of reflection in what we did, ambiances and backgrounds.
And I love that in a film like this, which is not the chase scenes, no explosions, very few. I don't think there's a bullet by in this movie. So you depend a lot on establishing spaces. Nothing establishes that quite like music, Daniel. There's not a lot of exteriors with cars and noises in the streets. So music is key. Daniel, this is 1950s. We have big band. We have Latin instrumentation. Where did you begin?
I mean, I kind of like, I always start with reading the script, and then I'll have a chat with Aaron about what we both think. And we'll basically kind of both kind of pull our cards out. Like, this is what I want to do. Aaron will be like, this is what I want to do. And what was interesting about this one is straight away, we were both like, this should be a classic orchestral score with a big theme. And because I wanted to capture kind of in some ways look, there's a whole bunch of different things. One of which is the kind of magic and the kind of the time period of just the approach of how music was scored in those days. And I wanted to write in the same way that you would write in that period. But then I also wanted to, let's capture the emotional beats of the film, which is what you always want to do as a film scorer. But you want to capture like what is this film about? And for me, if I could sort of like take this film down to one essence, it was always about a dream, and it was kind of about Lucy's dream of like a perfect home and a perfect life. And then it was also for me as an outsider, kind of like the dream of America, of like, I think this show, and again, this is me as an outsider because I didn't grow up with I Love Lucy, so it's a very weird thing for me to kind of be involved with. But I was very aware of its cultural significance, and I kind of felt, it's interesting to look through a different lens where I'm like, okay, this dream that Lucy has is also the dream of America, and she was the biggest star in America, and she's projecting this dream of like this perfect household, the perfect house. And time since then has changed, like the American ideal and the American dream of what we see America to be has changed a lot. And I'm also looking at it through the lens of today, of trying to recapture the magic of that moment, I think.
And it's certainly the dream of Desi, too, his story of coming from Cuba and losing his family and such. I mean, that dream plays a big deal, but at times it's also very playful. I mean, your score can be this, it can be lonely at times, it can be this, but there's also some moments of levity. Renee, you talked about sort of like those moments on set. How do you bring levity amidst the drama that we know is not going to end particularly well? Playfulness. There is some playfulness in this.
Yeah,
want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's hard because it's like in this score, there's like a couple of like, I'd say really big key like ideas behind it, and there's like the big thematic, very lush, romantic, I call it golden age kind of Hollywood sound. Then there is like an element which is kind of like Lucy's thinking, Lucy's process, Lucy working out what this is all about, like how to work a scene out. Then we have another aspect which is probably more like you say, it has a bit more of that levity, which is people looking back, people just like being within that environment and the ludicrousness of it and the seriousness of it. And with that stuff, which is probably more rhythmic, the stuff you're talking about is probably more rhythmic. It's trying to find a neutral balance where you're not pushing anything too comedic, and you're giving space to dialogue. With all Aaron's films, it's really important that the dialogue cuts through. So you're trying to work out, how can I write stuff that allows his words to cut through with the same power they would without music. And so that influences a lot of your decision making over those scenes as a composer.
And certainly the dialogue. I mean, it's an Aaron Sorkin. The dialogue is key. This is a story, and it's based in real life. But the story largely takes place inside with locations, and I love that about this film. A few that stand out. If you start, Renee, maybe like the writer's room and the set. I mean, that's the I Love Lucy set was revolutionary at its time. Do you want to start with the set?
Yeah, because he had, he came up with a 3-camera system so that everybody could see the set and they could see the audience. And Lucy really played off the audience. She needed to have the audience there. And that was really important too. We even cast voices that had a 50s feel to it. I mean, there was a lot of qualities put in there about maintaining that environment too. But going back and forth, like she had this ability to know when she was in the writer's room, they would pitch ideas to her. And she would sit there and imagine it in her head. And she had this gift to know whether or not it was going to get a laugh or whether it wouldn't work. And so we had a lot of work with transitions, and it was great with Daniel's too, because we worked a lot with his music, which was really important in the transitions between these. But it was, how do we get into her headspace? And when we're in her headspace, then we're on the set and it's real, but it's very like we mastered it with saturizing it in 50s analog feel, and it centered it, and created the sound pressure was different, so that you really felt that you were on a set, but you were still in her mind in the set. And then we'd snap back when she realized it wasn't working. She would just quickly cut out. And sometimes we would do it with music. Sometimes it would be, some hyper Foley moment. There was a lot of smoking in this because Philip Morris was sponsored the show, so everybody was constantly smoking. And so the Zippo lighters were really a lot of fun because you could snap out a Zippo lighter, and it would be like you'd snap out of that dreamlike, and then she would go back in. So there was a lot of transitional work that we did, and creating these different environments that went back and forth. So.
And Daniel, do you take into account the environments? Because there's clothes, there's intimacy here, there's sadness here.
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm composing, I'm always sort of influenced by like every aspect that's there, from sound to the script to performances to production design, environment, and you'll always look at things, this film's interesting in the sense that like there is more space, because a lot of these sound spaces, there's a lot more width for me as a composer, because we have these spaces that are, there's, if you're doing a film that's got a million things blowing up, you don't have a lot of space as a composer. And so this one, you do have that space, and that's what's, I always think there's so many things that tell story. It's sound, it's music, and it's always trying to find the balance between like allowing the sound to tell a story. Like just what Renee's saying about the bell, that tells you a story already. It tells you and it's like if you write music that goes over that and you can't hear it, then you're killing part of the story. So you have to find moments where everyone can have their storytelling aspect. And I think with this, like I would grab on a lot to like the sort of overarching backstory of Lucy or Lucille, and her kind of emotion within the story.
And one of those things when you get interiors that I've always noticed is some of the Foley and effects working with the music, especially if the music is not being overbearing and not being overly loud.
Right.
That detail. Renee, do you want to talk about that? I mean, it might be clicking a pen in the writer's room or anything
Well,
like that.
that's one of the transitions, which we at one point had this whole Zippo when everybody was sitting there waiting for them to come during the read through, the very opening part of it. We had this rhythm of this guy clicking a Zippo lighter, but then they shortened the spot and we had to lose that whole thing. I was kind of depressed about that. But also with what?
I was going to say the opening when we come on the soundstage, I always just loved the sound of that room, because it's like you have like for musical we have this thing over the logos, the sort of slightly terrible corporate logos that appear. So we're like so we write this musical thing over the beginning, which is the thematic big orchestral thing. Then we go into this conversational piece of everyone giving you backstory. The music's completely full on, and it's gone from like big orchestral to like very intense rhythm, and it's kind of non-stop. And then they get to the end of the story, boom, we get the title card. And it's kind of like quite relentless from this point up to there musically. And then we just cut to this like slow pan up of the first day. And it's so powerful. And that silence and the vibe of that room and the quiet, like studiousness of the writer's room is, for me, as atmospheric as like a sort of 70-piece orchestra. And it's that thing of having that bit beforehand and then taking you back to the silence and then absorbing, the beauty of that silence. And I think a lot of people just watch that and just go, oh, there's nothing here. But as we all know, there's so much there.
Right. I mean, it was just getting those right, just even creating the right coughs. They were so articulated in how we did it. You couldn't have too many. You couldn't have,
the cough.
You could hear someone, but you couldn't really hear what they were saying. And you needed, we had the Zippo lighter, we had the random pen drop, you had the cough at just the right moment. I mean, it was wonderful. And then also just the ambiance of the bigness of that empty set, that also had, and the lighting switch and it was really nice to do that. I love that. And I love that about when we do movies, that you create these pressures, there's this beautiful moment and then it just goes into, okay, pay attention. Now, what do we've botched.
I really think the opening is such a great example of like the power of sound and the power of like subtle sound, because it's, everyone thinks of sound's important if something's blowing up or there's something really loud. But, it's those, I always remember seeing it for the first time, like the mixed version, and just that moment just drew me in, like, so much. It's like so exciting when you watch a movie that is in its final stage, and all these tiny little touches just make it feel so much more real.
And I got to say, I think it was wonderfully edited. I got to say, and I do believe. Yeah. And how was your relationship on this film between music, effects, picture edit? I mean, how did it even work? It's different in every film, I know, but.
Well, Alan Baumgarten is the picture editor, and he also did Chicago 7. He's just amazing. I mean, we work really closely with Alan, and I know he works with Daniel too, and we all basically work together pretty closely. Like Daniel Waldman is the music editor who we worked a lot with, because there's this whole scene, just for instance, in when he's doing the rehearsal scene, and Desi's doing his the maracas, shake your maracas. And then the tap dancer was actually the actual rhythm section of that song, because it was just a piano, a guy in bongos, and Desi singing. And so I found the tap dancer. We went to a Foley stage, and I had her do all the riffing with her, tap dancing it. Then I went and cut it. And then I talked to Daniel Waldman, and he did a version. And then we kept going back and forth to where we got that tap dance to really work. So everything that, it's just a handoff constantly back and forth.
And Daniel Pemberton, are you hearing score at all, or are you hearing source in the songs at that point? And Daniel, when do you come in?
Well, I come in every film's quite different. Like with most of the projects, like if it's a long-term relationship, like Aaron and Alan as well, I like to get involved quite early. So I was always kind of shocked at how fast this movie got turned around, because I actually saw Aaron at the Oscars. I did Chicago 7, and I did not see him because of COVID. I didn't see anyone physically during that whole process. And then I got to see him for like 2 minutes at the Oscars. And he was like, so yeah, the next film we're shooting next week. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure you are. Because Alan kept telling me they're shooting quite soon. And I was like, they're not going to be shooting soon. It's like COVID. It's going to be like half a year. And then he was like, no, we're shooting next week. And I'm like, I got it.
And then it was done. And then
it's been a really crazy turnaround. But and in that process, I will deal with Alan a lot. We all deal with, like, it's me, Alan, Aaron, Daniel, Waldman, the music editor. And, sometimes he'd be like, right, let's throw this to Aaron. We'll go straight with Aaron. Sometimes he'd be like, right, let's do this on a sort of side channel. Let's work it out with Alan. Then we'll give it to Aaron. And what I think is so good about this process, like on this film, is it's such a collaboration between everyone involved.
Renee, were you? This was mixed in New York. Were you able to get in the room with Julian and Michael?
No, it was mixed. It was mixed in. I'm actually in New York now, but we did it all in LA.
Yeah,
and we did. So it was, they allowed 6 people on the stage. It was Daniel Waldman, our music editor, Julian Slater, Michael Babcock, me, and Alan. That was it. And then Aaron would show up for playback and things like that. But basically, that was about it. So
nice to be in the room with people, though, huh? Yeah.
So nice. I mean, that's the thing. It was shot again. I couldn't get to the set. I always like to go to the set and see what's going on and talk to, the production mixer. That was we were unable to do that because of COVID. I mean, he shot it pretty much when the vaccinations were not common at the time. It was, like you said, right after the Oscars. And it was, very tight.
People need to understand. I mean, this took place between March and finished and out for release by the end of the year, right? I mean,
it was so crazy. I mean, put it this way, I had to get special governmental permission to even come to America. Okay. that's how complicated it was to do
Yeah,
anything
you were in a
in
lockdown
America.
up until that point. Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah.
that's why I was always like, and I kind of thought when I get the first rushes, I kind of thought it's going to be basically two people in an empty room, this far apart, shouting at each other on a
A lot of
soundstage.
times it was.
And then you see the stuff, and I'm like, this is I think it's another big thing about this film that's spectacular, is how this has got pulled off under the circumstances it was made under,
Mhm,
and how good it looks.
mhm.
And I think it's a testament to everyone involved in the production, like
Right.
in every department, that they've managed to pull this off under like really, really complicated circumstances.
Yeah,
Like,
makeup. I mean, the everything, there was learning how to be Lucy. Her, Nicole had to go through different levels of, she had to become Lucy, which was a very sort of deep and smoky voice. And that was a register that's not natural for her. So she had to learn that. And then when she's Lucy, she's way up here. And so she spent 4 months just working with a movement coach and a dialect coach. So it was pretty intense for all of us.
I thought she was spectacular. I also, one of the things that, if a movie exceeds 2 hours and you don't feel it, that's great. And that's a testament to the pacing. I love the pacing throughout this movie because I thought it moved very well. Some of that is in this pulsing rhythmic stuff, Daniel, in your score. And then it comes into orchestral. And then you have a Latin big band. And so you have all these elements. And I mean, can you talk to me as we sign off here about pacing? I mean, it's important in the effects of Foley track, the dialogue, and in the music.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, from a musical point of view, I'm always like the thing I'm always thinking about most of all really is the audience of like their experience of the film. And that's always for me kind of the most important thing of like, how do we make this movie land every beat as strong as it can be? And like if you write orchestral music all the way through, this is like a big orchestral score, but it's like if it's all at 100 miles an hour, it starts to lose its impact. So it's like, right, let's choose the moments where we really want these bits to land. Okay. And let's say, even with the orchestra, there's moments that I really, really want to land that are really important. Like the ending, like when Lucy, I don't want to give too much away, people haven't seen it, the bit when, let's say, Lucy gets let off, doesn't let off, gets absolved of the thing that's hanging over her, right? And that she's a star, everyone recognizes she's a star. Bits where she's down, there's like big emotional beats, and I want those to really land, and I want them to be big. So we did those with a big 69-piece orchestra because that's the most we could get.
At Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, all in the room. Very complicated, very lucky that we recorded this a month later than we originally recorded because we wouldn't have been able to do it under COVID restrictions. But then I want to supplement those with small orchestral pieces because I don't want them all to feel the same size. I don't want it all to be the same kind of idea. And then we've got rhythmic and jazz stuff and the kind of on-camera Cuban music. And so for me, it's very important that there's a kind of flow through the film that you introduce a theme. We introduce a theme at the very beginning. The very first thing you hear in the film is the theme, which is the very last thing you hear as well. So if you watch the movie again, the opening 30 seconds are the theme which you hear at the end. And that is really about her journey and her dream. And then you're dropping the ideas from that theme in, ba, 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 through the movie, and then they pay off at the end. So that's one like dramatic journey you're trying to work on. And then the other one is just like texturally, just trying to find these different textures from, like I say, rhythmic, small orchestra, small stuff, big stuff, and trying to vary it up where you can, where appropriate, so everything lands better.
And Renee, I mean, to that point, I remember Wiley saying last year that it's the very specific points where you come in and out of the effect or in and out of the music. Those are so crucial in something like this. I mean, that's that rhythm of the. Can you talk about that rhythm of the sound edit in a sense?
Definitely. I mean, everything with Aaron, by the way, is rhythm. His cadences and the way he writes, the way people deliver lines, it's really important that, which was different when you've got somebody speaking another language. Their English is not their first language, so they speak cadences in different spots. And so if it's in a different spot, you don't understand it. So we worked a lot, just with dialogue, getting the right cadence. But the in and outs, deciding when to hear sound, when not, what sounds to hear, especially those going in and out of all these transitions, it was really important to choose each one, because each transition was different. It wasn't like there was that trend, and we constantly were going back in time and forward in time, different kinds of elements that, was happier when we'd go back in time. It wasn't so when we would go forward. There was just a lot of choices to be made about when and how and where, how and when to use reverb, when to not. It was a lot of there was a lot of that going on. It was
Well, it's a perfect example to me of like a really well designed and executed track. That it's not about car chases. It's not about monsters. It's about a week in the life of Lucille Ball. And I applaud you. I applaud you on that. I really, really enjoyed the film. Thank you. Thank you, Renee Tondelli. Thank you, Daniel Pemberton. Everybody. It opens December 10th, I believe, theatrically, the same day that shortlist voting begins. And then I think on December 20th or something, you can see it on Amazon. Well, thank you all. And thank you to the audience for tuning in.